We are in Hyderabad at the Bharat Summit. This is Dipankar, and we will be talking to Professor Muqtedar Khan over a host of issues, mostly related to the recent developments between India and Pakistan, which has been happening since the Pahalgam terror attack. So, welcome, Dr. Khan. So, basically, how would you like to, see this whole build-up of emotions, of rhetoric, and everything post whatever happened in Pahalgam?
So my first reaction is that it is extremely traumatic. 26 people died, all of them innocent. They have no blame. They were there. In fact, they were contributing to Kashmir's economy. So they were doing good for Kashmir and they were killed for that. So that is very tragic. And then the manner in which they were killed, where identification of religion was also played a role. So I think that is also a terrible thing to happen. But it has put India in a very terrible position, especially Prime Minister Modi, because one, the attack in Kashmir sort of negates the narrative that after the abrogation of 370, things had become normalized in Kashmir. And now this says that it is not being normalized. The biggest sign of normalization was tourism. But if this particular incident kills tourism in Kashmir, then definitely it's not normalization. So I hope that tourism does not decline in Kashmir, because decline of tourism means that the economy of Kashmir suffers and the more opportunity for radicalization. And so this whole idea that the experiment of abolition of 370 would have failed. On the other hand, if you remember the speech that General Asim Munir gave about a week ago, that speech taken in connection with this particular episode clearly seems to signal that there is something negative, profoundly negative, anti-India coming from across the border. And so I don't blame the Indian government for immediately concluding that Pakistan has had a hand in what happened in Kashmir. But it puts India in a very difficult position, like how do you respond? So there are two levels at which India has to respond. One is within the domestic level. First, catch the terrorists. Find them, catch them, bring them to justice, identify them. At least they have been identified. There is clearly an intelligence failure. India has a lot of troops, anywhere between 300,000 to 500,000 in Kashmir. So the security failure is inexplicable. The whole idea of 370 abrogation was that security became a matter that Delhi controlled. So now you see that the failure of security, in spite of Delhi's control, is something that needs to be looked at. From an international perspective, the challenge is how is India going to respond? There is something called the architecture of peace that we have had. Since 2021, there has been a ceasefire between India and Pakistan that helped India, especially after the Galwan episode, because India's western border was calm. India could focus on the eastern border and focus on responding to China. Now, there's a pretty good chance that the western border will become hot again. Then India is now cancelling the Indus Water Treaty, which was one of the oldest treaties since 1960s. It was holding. So there was something peaceful between India and Pakistan. Now Pakistan has threatened to abrogate the Simla Accord. So the infrastructure of peace between India and Pakistan is crumbling, and which means that rebuilding it is going to take a long time. Plus, the question really is that what is Prime Minister Modi going to do? What kind of a military response is there going to be? There's going to be a diplomatic response. Of course, Dr. Jaishankar is going to try very hard to isolate Pakistan, label it as a terrorist state. Maybe even the United States might be toying with the idea of labeling Pakistan as a terrorist state. But militarily, is there going to be a surgical strike? Is India going to use drones or just use missiles? And the risk is that if India does something very small, then Pakistan will be tempted to respond because it's a low-risk activity. They'll say, okay, they shot 3 drones at us, we will shoot 3 drones at them. What's the big deal? So, but if India sends a massive thing, I think the best thing would be to identify a terrorist training camp and hit it really hard. Then Pakistan will not have the moral justification for responding. But I suspect that India has to be careful, because a limited war which does not do too much damage to Pakistan is in the interest of the current Pakistani establishment, because the military is not popular. Everybody in Pakistan seems to hate the military and Shehbaz Sharif's government because of what they did to Imran Khan. But if India attacks Pakistan, then this entire public in Pakistan will rally behind the army and will rally behind Shehbaz Sharif. So in that sense, a limited small war is in the interest of Shehbaz Sharif and Asim Munir. And so India should avoid falling to that trap. If they're going to attack, then they need to punish severely.
You talked about the Western Front. It at the east, things are equally looking not very good, or I should say bad, with Bangladesh. So what do you think about this second front, which is now quite active for some time?
Bangladesh is not a military threat to India, but Bangladesh is a security threat. So, for example, a lot of people who apparently were doing violence in Kashmir used to come through Nepal. Now they can come through Bangladesh. If you remember that the security requirement to go from Pakistan to Bangladesh has been reduced significantly, so there's lots of military. So if Pakistan wants to play dirty games with India, it now has an additional front from where it can cause problems for India for security purposes. But Bangladesh is more of an economic challenge to India, because if Bangladesh collapses, then you'll have a refugee crisis in India. And plus Bangladesh, because of the fear that India is probably trying to bring back Sheikh Hasina, because Sheikh Hasina should not be in India. This is my view from the very beginning. She should have gone to Dubai. London doesn't want it. DC doesn't want it. Singapore and Dubai are probably where she should be. But because she's in India, she's creating insecurities in Bangladesh. They think that Modi wants to bring her back. And that is why there's a lot of anti-India sentiment. And it is pushing Bangladesh towards Pakistan and pushing Bangladesh towards China. So what has happened is this anti-Muhammad Yunus sentiment in India has achieved something which we wouldn't have expected last year, that Pakistan and Bangladesh would resolve all the disagreements of 1971. You know, Yunus has even put a price, saying some $4.5 billion, and we'll forget what you did to us. So that is a big challenge. One of the two things that people in India are not considering seriously. One is that Indian security intelligence is having consistent failures. They failed to anticipate what was happening in Bangladesh. They got tricked by the FBI and they got caught in the US. Now there was an intelligence failure in Pahalgam. So there has to be some view of what's going on. The second thing that is happening in India is that India's South Asia policy is a complete failure. They talk a lot about Chanakya, and Chanakya looks at the world in concentric circles. And so India is based on that is this, neighborhood first policy. It is an utter failure. Maldives, you saw what happened with Maldives. Bangladesh is gone. If you ask random people which is your biggest enemy, they might say radical Islam. But now the biggest friend of India is the Taliban in South Asia, which is a radical Islam. There's no more radical than the Taliban. So it's kind of a comical. India's foreign policy has a comical outcome in South Asia. So part of it is because of the I don't know whether you have ever done this. Have you, at a signal when you park your car, and if there's another car parked at you, it will resonate at the same frequency. Notice it sometime, your motorcycle or other motorcycles. So that is what happens. If there's a lot of anti-Muslim sentiment in India, that you see anti-Hindu sentiment in Bangladesh resonating. So when India negotiates with Bangladesh, Prime Minister Modi doesn't factor the fact that Amit Shah called Bangladeshis as termites has a consequence on the other side. So I think India's South Asia policy and India's intelligence failures need to be reviewed in a serious way. I don't know how they would do it in India, but in the US we would have called for a Senate inquiry or Senate public hearing where experts are called. Like, I would like to see Ajit Doval sitting in front of a parliamentary commission and answering the questions. Like, how come you didn't know what was happening?
Mr. Khan, you spoke about trade. Tariffs have been a big thing in vogue these days after Mr. Trump came to power. So how do you see as to the tariff I would not say war, but the situation evolving with India and US relations on business, and obviously on the aftermath of what Pakistan did yesterday, stopping all trade with India bilateral.
So I want to make a point that your audience should listen very carefully. When you see all these reports of US-India trade, sometimes they say 130 billion, sometimes they say 190 billion. Those are manufactured goods trade only. India also has a services trade. So India's services, mostly IT, etc., are about $320 billion, of which 70% go to the US. So India is selling about $200 billion worth of services to the US, which are not affected. So if India's total trade with the US is above $330 billion, of which 200 is services, and that is not affected at all. So now we are looking at only $130 billion, which is the manufactured goods, in which India is pretty good in pharmaceuticals and is hoping to get better in semiconductors. But the luxury items that India is trying to block is irritating Donald Trump. Look, how many people are going to buy Harley Davidson? Why do you have to have 150% tariffs on it? Make it zero. If it is upsetting Trump, how many you may buy 50,000 more Harley Davidson? That is nothing. You're selling hundreds of thousands of Hondas and Suzukis in this country. But the real threat is the agricultural sector, which is where America could really hurt India's domestic farmers. Like we can't sell our corn here in India. So if US is a incredible, like 5 to 6% or less of the population produces enough food. We could feed the world. So if Indian markets are open to us, we will come. You'll find everything grown in America here, and people don't realize that after COVID, the agricultural sector has grown by, they say, 6 crore people. 60 million people went from cities to villages, and they work in the agricultural sector. You know, when a country gets modernized, people move from agriculture to manufacturing to services. What has happened in India in the past 4-5 years? People have moved back from manufacturing or services to agriculture. So technically it's going backwards from a development point of view. And so you have a large percentage of your people in agriculture. It's the biggest contribution to GDP. Manufacturing is only 17%. So if that is exposed to America, it could really upset Indian economy. And of course, I don't know whether Prime Minister Modi is just thinking of the economy, but given his relations with farmers, he's also worried that he could lose Punjab and Haryana and all of these states where the farmers are there. So it's a very politically dangerous scenario. So that is why I think India from the very beginning was compromising with Trump, while every country from Canada or Mexico, China, of course, Xi Jinping just stood up to every country, even the European Union pushed back except India. India agreed from the very beginning. So they are getting the first bilateral treaty, but I think we need to look at it very closely, especially the agricultural sector, and see that whether India's interests, long-term interests, are hurt or not. But it is possible that Xi Jinping has done a favor to the rest of the world by standing up to India. Even Japan sold a lot of US Treasury bonds, which brought the dollar down, which brought inflation up, stock market down, and Trump is backing off. So if Trump backs off, then India's decision to reduce tariffs was unnecessary. Right? So it's a very tricky situation, and I think we will not know what the total picture is until 2 quarters go by, because in order for a country to be declared that it is in recession, you have to have 2 quarters where the economy shrinks. And if the US economy does well in one of the 2 quarters, then Trump will be more aggressive. But if we go into recession, then he will probably move it backwards.
My final question, Mr. Muqtedar Khan, is you have seen China has come out after a very long time, in fact probably for the first time, in favor of India after this attack has happened. How do you figure Indo-China relations from now on vis-a-vis India's relations with its immediate neighbors?
I think, I don't know whether you saw one of the favorite sweets being served here is double ka meetha. So all people from outside Hyderabad are looking at the double ka meetha and their mouths are watering. I think when Chinese see Indian market, their mouth waters. And so China is going to lose a lot of US market, no doubt about it. It was about the total trade is over 650 billion. If you go back a couple of years, it was even more. And so the tariffs and decoupling, all of that is, so China is going to lose the US market significantly, especially it's not able to sell its cars, the electric cars. So it's searching for alternative markets. It's searching for Europe and Asia, and that's why Xi Jinping went on a tour to Vietnam, Cambodia, and Malaysia and made concessions there, saying we will give you access. What America was asking of China, Xi Jinping gave to Malaysia and Cambodia and Vietnam. So India is going to target India directly or indirectly anyway. It's going to either flood the Indian market indirectly by dumping or wants to simply have access. I met somebody yesterday who was telling me that BYD is now easily available in Hyderabad. So he wants those electric vehicles to come here all over the Indian market. So you could say that the ease with which the Galwan episode tension was released was, to some extent, India has also realized that it needs China, and China really needs India. So this tension with Trump has forced Xi Jinping to be nicer to India. And the uncertainty of the US and the fact that India is realizing that it cannot become a manufacturing growth without, because see, all the pharmaceutical that India exports, the ingredients come from China. Even the iPhone ingredients come from China. So India has realized its dependency on China for manufacturing. So both the countries need each other at the moment. So I think that geopolitical things aside, economically, I think you will see that China-India's trade will rise very fast. I think it will grow faster than US-India.
That was Mr. Muqtedar Khan from Delaware, US, talking to us on a host of issues. This is Dipankar Bose for ETV Bharat, Hyderabad.